good to have you with us at the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, here is one more important issue that deals directly with you, the viewer, the voter. One extremely important issue that often gets hidden in the big political headlines of the day. But I want to tonight talk about the moratorium that was given by the Reserve Bank of India for borrowers, the loan relief, the 6-month waiver that was given for those who had borrowed money to say, well, you don't have to pay or repay your loan or your interest for 6 months if you are in a difficult position because of the lockdown. And that deadline was August 31st. Initially, if you remember, the Reserve Bank of India rather, had announced it for 3 months, and then they gave another extension for till August 31st. Now, they've also come out with a proposal to look at one-time loan restructuring, which is to say, from September, when the payments start again, and you are struggling to make your payments, maybe your bank can look at an option of restructuring your loan and giving you some amount of relief. But there are two aspects here tonight, viewers, that I want to discuss. One is, of course, the larger issue, the demand that is now coming out for extension in this moratorium. Many say that business is still down and out. In fact, more people have lost their jobs, shut down their businesses in the last couple of months, and that the COVID pandemic still continues. So there should be an extension in this loan relief that was given, and don't finish it on August 31st. Then there is another aspect, and this is a case which was going on in the Supreme Court for quite a while. While there is a relief and a moratorium, what should happen to the interest being charged on your interest? And that became a controversial point. This is what the Supreme Court said today. They slammed the central government for not taking a clear position. The Supreme Court said you cannot only be interested in profit. You have to consider the sufferings of people in this country. Centre's role is apparent behind the RBI's decision. So why are you hiding behind the Reserve Bank of India? The Supreme Court said, clarify your position under the Disaster Management Act. If the Disaster Management Act has been used for everything else to bring in unprecedented rules and regulations, why can't the centre use this and clarify its stand? Centre, the Supreme Court said, the centre must file a categorical reply by 1st of September on this issue. What does our central government think? Whether there should be interest charged on the interest for these months or not? And I'll tell you why this happened, because the Solicitor General told the to the court that RBI is a regulator and that is the one that will take a position. They will identify the stressed accounts and then they will see what kind of relief has to be brought in. So let me quickly go across to our panelists and say good evening to the panelists who are joining us. And here are my twofold questions for tonight. One is, should there be interest on interest? What are we only thinking about banks? Should we think about borrowers? But if we think only about borrowers, will the banks just struggle because they also have the rest of their business to run? Where do they get their money? And second, the extension in moratorium. If not extension in moratorium, can we look at other options for reducing the stress on people who borrowed and took this money? Can we lower their interest? What can be our options? That's the simple conversation. Dipali Pant Joshi, former ED of the Reserve Bank of India, with me this evening. Very good to have you again with us, Mr. Joshi. Thank you so much. Joel Rebello, Assistant Editor for Economic Times, with us this evening. Gopal Agarwal, National Spokesperson for the BJP. Sanjay Shah, MD for Venus Products Private Limited, runs his own business and is here to talk about what the businessmen, companies are going through and what he seeks from the RBI or his own bank. Dr. Kalra, a home buyer, is with me this evening, struggling right now with the finances in times of a lockdown and an economic slowdown. And Sunil Alag, a business and brand consultant, with me as well. Let me see. First up, if I can actually go across to Dr. Kalra. Dr. Kalra, as a common man who's taken upon a loan, like many of us have, various kinds of loans, how are you going about repaying it right now?
With the pandemic of COVID, the income of majority of the people have gone down. If the income is low, it's very difficult for them to pay the EMI. Now, some of the home buyers, like the Unitech home buyers, who have purchased the villas or houses in the Unitech projects, like we purchased in Elder Grove. We have purchased it in 2010. Until to date, we have not got the homes. So we have to hire the houses on rent. So on one hand, we are paying the interest, paying the EMI. On the other hand, we are paying the loans. It becomes very difficult for people to pay both the EMI and rent during the period of COVID. Some rebate is definitely required during this period.
Okay, no, I completely understand your point, Dr. Kalra, because you know, and especially you haven't even got your home yet. You're paying the bill for that in times where everybody is struggling with their income. Just now, I was reading, and we are flooded with responses on social media, on Twitter as well. A person from the hospitality industry has just tweeted saying, "Really bad situation. I was working in the hospitality industry, lost my job in March 2020. Till now, there is no clarity on when and if the food and beverages sector will get back. I don't know how I will repay my home loan, vehicle and personal loan." And that's the big problem. People who lost their source of livelihood back in March. Restaurants are not even running to full capacity even now. Many of them on the verge of shutdown. Hotels barely have any guests coming in except those whom we need to be in quarantine, whether they're medical professionals or other essential services. So how are these people going to be paying their loans? That becomes the big question. Let me also bring in Sanjay Shah, MD of Vinis Products. Sanjay, what about the smaller businesses? The government has come out with a series of schemes to empower the SME segment. To what extent has that helped? Do you still believe that more loan relief is required?
Yeah, good evening, Tanvi. I sincerely believe that a lot of things were announced, but in reality, lot needs to be done further, because what government did moratorium, many of the industry just initial period when they announced in the March end. In fact, most of the companies had paid their EMI for March. By the time the banks came and made their house proper and came with the proposal, April first week was over. So two more EMIs were paid by many of the small scale industry and the medium scale industries. So in real fact, they only got the moratorium if they availed for only month of May. So that was one difficulty. Secondly, they survived maybe because they borrowed the top up what government announced, that whatever was the loan, running loan as on 31st March, they can borrow 20% of that loan. So many companies had to borrow that loan to continue paying that further interest and the liability. Because interest on interest was one of the things which held back the industry in offering or opting for the moratorium. That is what I could say from on behalf of my industry.
Okay, fair enough. Two very different segments of borrowers here with us making their opening remarks on why they believe some more relief is required. Let me bring in Mr. Gopal Agarwal. Mr. Gopal Agarwal, where does your government stand? You will have to make it clear to the Supreme Court in a few days. But tell us, what's your party's view?
Tanvi, you said in your opening remark that we have to look into what are the options with the government. And the whole ecosystem of financial structure has to look into options. That's very important, because ultimately economic decision, business decision, or anything which has to do into finance has to choose one of the options. There will always be some benefit in some and some problems with the other. So what is the option? If the government, if the RBI decide that there should be no interest on the moratorium, then the bank and other things have, IBA and other banks have said that they have to pay interest on deposit, one thing. How that money will come. Second thing is, ultimately this cost will come to the other borrowers. Definitely bank have to meet their cost and benefit allowance. That is one thing. And if you say that if the RBI should bear this cost, it's one option. Third is if the government has to bear this as a subsidy, this is the third option. But ultimately, then the RBI's position is that if you start like this, there is a credit behavior issue also. So considering all these things, the RBI has said they have set up a committee of Mr. Kamath, under which will give the system on how there are, not everybody is under stress. There are liquidity problem, but there are certain sections, there are certain segments like MSME, tourism, hotel industry, etc. They are in extreme stress. So they have said that there are issues of NPA, stressed assets, etc. For that, Kamath committee will recommend the waive of restructuring, or restructuring means waiving of interest loan also, reducing the debt component also, converting into equity also. There are so many options through which the bank restructures loan, and they can waive off this thing. So ultimately, only for the stress asset, the problem is there, I think. So those sectors which have stress, they will be taken care of under the Kamath committee, which will recommend the restructuring formula, process, and even the bank are free. So the thing is that commercial decisions have to take commercial options into consideration. And we are not saying that the government is not conversant that there is a problem of certain borrowers. Government can take position, government can decide everything, but ultimately there are regulators, there are RBI has the responsibility of regulate. It is also a part of the government. If RBI takes a decision, how can you say that it is not a government decision? RBI is a part of the government. So the government, RBI is well within its
just
power
like
to decide on it.
Just like Mr. Gopal Agarwal, the government keeps telling the Supreme Court that it's not our decision, it's the RBI's decision to charge or to not charge interest on interest. Now, of course, the Supreme Court says, well, everybody knows that you are behind this, behind this decision.
Who is saying that RBI is not part of government?
You spoke about businesses.
I'm saying RBI is part of government.
Of course, it's not. We fight.
No,
we fight a lot for the the autonomous status of the Reserve Bank of India, and we hope it continues to be that. Let me ask you this.
Doesn't mean that
you mentioned you referred to, yes, there is a need to look at options.
All regulators, though they are autonomous, they are part of government. You cannot say that SBI is not part of government.
Okay, all right, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, let me ask you a question. Mr. Gopal Agarwal, let's stick to the point. Here is my question to you. You spoke about, yes, there is a need. We need to explore options to how the businesses can be helped. What about retail borrowers? What about people who've lost their jobs, have had to shut down businesses, have struggled to pay their own employee, or simply run their own family and pay their loans, whether it's a vehicle loan or a home loan or a personal loan? What about those people and relief for them beyond August 31st?
No, I'm telling you, the government has announced certain relief measures in Atmanirbhar Bharat, where it is providing equity capital, credit guarantee, etc. And what I'm telling you is that the RBI stress part of the asset, those sectors which having a problem, that particular sector or that particular segment will be given a mechanism or process where asset loan will be recast, restructured. There is a strong process through which MSME is being looked into. Even IBC has been relaxed. So you have to look into every aspect which the government is doing. Government has given a credit guarantee to many of the sectors, which is being provided to the bank. Then the RBI is looking after the system of restructuring. And the third thing is, finance minister said to the FICCI platform that like hospitality, etc., which are in extreme stress, their moratorium or interest waiver or subsidies, etc., the government is give. In the agriculture loan, the government is giving subsidies for the agriculture loan. Even RBI has given subsidy on the interest rate. Now, if you look into any of the loans, government with association with RBI reduced their interest rate have drastically been reduced
Okay.
because they have been given moratorium, they
Okay,
have been
okay.
given
All right.
restructuring, they have been relaxed from the IBC, identification of NPA is being relaxed. So all these measures should include the government support to the segments.
Okay, let me bring in our other panelists who haven't spoken. So Dipali Pant Joshi, what's your view? Many say that if we put any more pressure on the banks to extend the moratorium, to not charge interest on interest, then how are they going to run the rest of their business? They also, at the end of the day, have to pay the interest to the depositors.
Absolutely correct. I'm so glad you said it. So first, let me make it very clear. And thank you for also trying to make that clear that the RBI is, was, and always will be autonomous as all central banks are meant to be. Now, what does the RBI worry most about? The first priority is the resumption of normalization of economic activity. What does the country need? GDP growth of 8 to 8.5%. How will that happen? Banks are like money shops. If the banks do not get the loans which they have extended back, if you extend, then your economic activity is going nowhere, your financial discipline goes for a toss, and it is extremely important for you to increase, as a country, to increase employment and productivity. Once economic activity, which has come to a juddering halt, resumes, then many of the processes will work out. You also mentioned the depositors. Now, when the RBI issues a license to the bank, one of the conditions under Section 22(3) of the Banking Regulation Act is that it continues to service the needs of its depositors and meets them. Therefore, we should not forget the poor pensioner, the poor depositor who is also dependent on interest income. Now, for interest on interest, the option is to convert it into, pointed out, these are commercial decisions. As far as your credit card, your EMI, your home loan are concerned, you will have to sit across the table with your banker, and your banker will assess the limit of moral hazard. Also, please understand, the bank has to assess the portfolio here. The bank has to estimate to what extent its NPAs are going to increase and what the provisioning has to be against those. The RBI has also to worry about international rating agencies and the overall health and stability of the financial system, because the investors will flock to India only if they are assured that India has an independent central bank, an independent, modern, strong, and healthy financial institutions, which meet international norms, because you're doing business with other countries who follow certain norms of provisioning, and you have to have credit discipline. You can't just say that, this is largesse. This is not state largesse. Banks are money shops. They are giving you money. They will help you to service their loans. I'm sure the Cabinet Committee, considering that it has Divakar Gupta, ex-ADB, it has Mr. Manoharan, it has seasoned other people of eminence, will set in place broad standards. But the implementation of those standards will rest with the banks and will finally and at the end of the day be a commercial decision of the bank, and the bank will have to evaluate the degree of moral hazard, because the credit sanction and the post-disbursement credit follow-up has all to be done by the bank. So are we on the same page on this? Hello?
Yes, I take your point. I take your point, what you're saying.
Hello, can you
In
hear
fact,
me?
if I can just pick up from, a couple of options that you Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm not too sure if you can hear me, Ms. Joshi. I can, and we
I
could
can,
perfectly hear the
I can,
points that you
because
just
I'm
listed
afraid
out.
of.
Let me take some of those across to Joel. I'll come back to you and fix that audio line as well. Joel, what are the options that the RBI currently can look at, or the banks will be willing to, look at right now? The larger demand, of course, is to say, well, give us more extension. We don't have a job right now. Our business is shut right now. How will we pay this loan? Now, if not a complete extension of the moratorium, what are the other options that could be possible?
I think the RBI is actually working on those options. The restructuring is one such options. I don't think the RBI has many options right now. We know that we are in probably an unprecedented situation. We didn't expect this to happen. I mean, this is probably the worst recession we have seen in our lifetimes, for sure. Maybe in 100 years in India. But the RBI has only probably one or two options, which is what they're working on. That is to restructure loans. What does restructuring mean? It means they'll give borrowers more time to pay, or probably reduce their rates for now and elongate the tenure. So those are the options they're working on. So for the first time, probably individual loans also, personal loans, maybe home loans, are also within the ambit of this restructuring. This was always available for companies, but this is the first time the RBI has opened it up for individuals as well. I also want to get this point about whether the RBI can do this. The main contention of the RBI, or fear of the RBI, so to say, is because of the experience with restructuring in the past. Tanvi, you know that there are so many top promoters or companies who have willfully defaulted on loans. There's thousands of crores of banks gone down the drain. They're not willing to pay up. And it is you and me, it is the depositors who ultimately pay for those willful defaulters. These promoters have had a lavish lifestyle. They have taken loans from banks. They've probably siphoned it off to their overseas bank accounts, and they're probably living a good life. But the RBI has helped them restructure loans, and probably in conveyance with some bankers. But it's never worked out. So the RBI has always been he's been careful, so to say, to not to repeat these mistakes of the past. So that's why there's been a little bit of skepticism of how to do this, because we have done this before, and things have not worked out as expected. Yes, there's also this aspect of depositors. Also, this aspect about small companies. I think the RBI has given a special window for micro and small companies to restructure their loans, and also individuals, and also large companies with the Kamath committee is looking at. So I think this is the broad framework. I don't think the RBI has much options beyond this. Tanvi.
No, so that's very interesting that you pointed out, and of course, the big corporates, the biggest of the names, can default, and it's simply a write-off, and proceedings can continue for years together without any attempts actually being made on ground to get any of that money back from these super rich guys who can actually afford to pay. But like Joel pointed out, when it comes to the common man, the small time borrower, then the very next day there will be one loan agent, recovery agent at your doorstep asking you for money, running around and harassing you. That unfortunately is the truth in our country today. But Joel, the other contentious issue has been about the interest on interest. Now, as the battle goes on Supreme Court, what is happening on ground? Are banks really charging this to the people? Do they know they're having to pay this additional interest because they are availing the moratorium facility?
So you should understand, Tanvi, banks work on an accounting system. So this interest will be accounted for the next 2 quarters, even if the money is not coming in. So they are just accounting for this interest. When you're saying that you do not charge interest on this at all, which means this interest will have to be reversed. In other words, it will have to be taken off their earnings, which means bank profitability will come down, or maybe they will make losses. And also deposit will have to pay, because if the banks can't pay, get their interest which they are lending, how would they pay their depositors? That's the point I think the RBI has also been making in court. I think they have also said that crores of depositors will probably lose if these loans are totally waived off. Interest on interest is an accounting term. I mean, certainly also we should look at it broadly in the sense there's also this moral hazard, right? Suppose I am a borrower, you are also a borrower. If I have ensured that I have enough cash with me to fall back on a rainy day, and I have been very honest and paid my loans, and tomorrow you say, okay, you've paid, that's okay, but Tanvi is not paid, but you should give them a total waiver. I mean, is it fair for me? I mean, tomorrow I will say, why should I pay? That's the moral hazard the RBI is also working around. So, this is not an easy topic. It's a difficult subject. And interest on interest is an accounting framework. I mean, in the sense, you cannot just, let go of interest.
So let me actually attempt to simplify this again, Joel. Yeah, so let me attempt to simplify this. Since you say it's a very pure accounting practice, but it's a case that's gone to the Supreme Court right now.
Yeah.
For example, I have taken a loan and my EMI is 30,000 per month. And of that, say the interest component is 20,000 and the principal component is maybe 10,000. Now, I have chosen to avail this facility because even if I have cash or don't have cash, I want to keep that cash with me. I don't know when I will get my job again or when I'll be able to restart my business again. So, I'm not going to be paying anything to the bank for 6 months. Now, on that 20,000 interest, does this mean that I have to pay additional interest? Or simply that once I start repaying, I have to pay what I haven't for 6 months?
You will have to pay the additional interest because it will get compounded. It is a compounded interest that the banks work on. Even if you keep deposits, they get compounded. So what you earn as deposits, it will give you a compounded interest. So that's a accounting jargon, sorry to say, but that's how it works. So it will be compounded. You'll have to pay for 6 months, and if you don't pay for 6 months, it will be compounded for the later half. So which means you may have to pay more later if you don't pay for 6 months.
Correct. Thank you for explaining that, and I understand when you say that this is just a practice, it automatically happens for any loan account, and that's how it will get calculated. But when a government in an unprecedented time, or even the central bank in an unprecedented era in our lives has come up with a special scheme to give us relief, then perhaps some of these traditional practices also have to be relooked at. That's my view. The Supreme Court will decide later on. Let me also go across to Mr. Sunil Alag. Thank you for patiently waiting by, Mr. Alag. Two aspects we are discussing tonight. One, of course, is the interest on interest and the ethical view behind it versus the business angle. And the two, should the government be looking at other options to give relief to the borrowers, especially the small-time borrowers who are struggling when our economy is down in the dumps?
I've been listening to everybody, and it's okay to be talking to panelists, but the average person on the road has to be explained what is going on. RBI has reduced its interest rate by almost 2 or 3% since the beginning of the year. Have the banks reduced it and in all their loans as yet? My answer is a categorical no. So now the question is, RBI can only give a reduction of interest rate to banks. Banks have taken their own sweet time in giving the lower rates of interest. If you go for a fixed deposit in any bank, and now I want to tell everybody, why does a bank like HDFC give only 5%? There's an IndusInd bank who's giving 7%. Another bank is giving 6% on your fixed deposit. It all depends upon the cash flow that each bank has. So you get a lower rate of interest, but they are not passing that interest on. So the question is that banks are flushed with money. Why aren't people taking those loans? The fundamental reason for not taking the loans is we as Indians, on an average, even if we get a moratorium, we say, look, we have to repay it within 6 months. We have to pay interest on that. So it's much better for us not to go and take loans. Now, the important thing that I've been saying to the RBI for a very long time, that look, if you have instructed the banks to give moratorium, there's only 1% interest all over the world. They've reduced it to 1. I'm not saying we should reduce it to 1, but if you brought it down to 5%, for instance, credit cards, they charge you 18%. Now it's a complete haywire. Now you can take a credit card and use it, and then if you don't, they don't like people to pay the full amount. Actually, the credit cards are very happy. Forget about the RBI giving you moratorium. You can carry on paying the minimum because they're going to live on your interest. So the important thing is that RBI must instruct
Correct.
everybody now to say that if I am reducing interest, you better reduce interest on all the moratorium part. I'm not saying give it away free, but they are not doing it. And therefore, by the time Kamath committee is able to do anything, another 3 months will go by. That is why RBI, let me tell you, has stepped in and said, asked all the banks, please, you all go and restructure loans. Restructure loans means fundamentally they look after their principal amount. If the principal amount is paid now, we will waive off the interest or we'll reduce the interest. And this has been done for years. So why aren't they doing it today? Why do they need any instructions from RBI? That's my point. It's a very simple one. Look, the supply side the government has taken care of. Today there's a lack of demand. Once there's no demand, nobody wants to take a loan and keep on for what? To manufacture the products which you can't sell. So the government has to use for the middle income group or incentivize them to spend, reduce their income tax. It's a more global scene which has to be worked out together. And that is what everybody needs to understand, and not accounting terms, X term, what is RBI doing and all. That's okay for economists, and I'm an economics honor student. But I'm actually addressing what your viewers are wanting. And I've been saying it right from the beginning that they have to. What is restructuring? Restructuring, all banks say, give me back my principal. I will waive off the interest which was due for 1 year. I'll take only 3 months. That's what's restructuring. And that's going on for years. Now, to say that, okay, 3 guys are bad, like you've said, somebody's run away. You don't paint the entire industry with that same brush and get away with it. To say, oh, you stole from the bank, so let me screw everybody else. That's not fair. That's all that I wish to say. And I'm finishing off by saying, look, the RBI has done it. The banks have to do it. We don't have to wait for Kamath. In fact, RBI has said, don't wait for the Kamath Rat, start restructuring loans. And that's what RBI can do. It's up to the banks now. And government has to get the oil put in by getting them to spend, because otherwise who's going to take your loans in the first place? Unless there's a demand for the products.
Okay, let me ask Ms. Dip. Right, let me ask Dipali Joshi if she wants to come into this. Why don't the banks start it already? What are we waiting for? These are simple things and nothing really out of the box that we are talking about.
Absolutely, and it's entirely the discretion of the banks. And what I have always been saying is that you need resumption of economic activity, because then only your demand will pick up. Now, the government can support this by buying things from the MSMEs and ensuring them cash flow. The banks obviously do not want to part with the cash which they have and they're holding on to. But it has to be impressed upon them that there are going to be no more extensions. You have to get back to normalcy, which means you have to estimate and you have to tweak their loans and help them. You also need to segment your borrowers. No one is shedding tears for the large corporates who are merely doing whatever it is that they have always done. It is the small guy who has a personal loan, who has no job, who will get no job till the economy starts firing on all cylinders. The economy needs lubrication, it needs liquidity for that, it needs money for that, which is why the big guys must start repaying their, look at Atmanirbhar Bharat and should take whatever is available to them, restructure their loans, and please begin producing again. And once jobs are there, ordinary jobs, your courier guy's job, your service industry, your hospitality industry, all those poor people who have been laid off, once they get into, because COVID is something you have to live with now. You have no cure for it. You do not know how long it will take. You just know that you have suddenly shut down everything. That cannot be something which will be there ever and anon. So you have to try to get back to normalcy, to live with this thing which is haunting us, but at the same time to fight it and to try very hard for economic growth to resume, because otherwise your recession hasn't even begun yet. You have no idea of what you're looking at. The only silver lining is that you have a bumper harvest, you will not have famine, you will not have people dying, and you have enough food stocks. But that's not going to help you to resume economic activity, to kickstart demand, for which you need the cycle to start again and for people to repay their loans. Because not repaying helps nobody. Look at all the actors. What do you as a borrower want? You want
Right.
a decent way in which your loan is restructured in a way in which you're able to service it. 90% of the borrowers are not dishonest. The poor borrower or the middle class borrower is the most honest borrower. He just wants it to be tailored in such a way that she is able to repay that loan. What do the financial institutions want? They want
Well,
healthy balance sheets for to have it where exactly they are. So what does the depositor want? The poor depositor lives on the interest on which he gets, and he feels terrorized that you will introduce a bail-in clause by
well,
which you will use his deposits to set off the loss of the bank. No, that's not the way to go about it. Let's get our priorities straight. Our priority is to have healthy banks, to have honest depositors who will not default willfully, and to have an economy which is going to resume again, so you can use your demographic bonus. Your demographic dividend does not become minus the B, a demographic onus for you. Because if you do that, your law and order situation is
well,
going
let
to
me just say this,
completely
Dipali
break down,
Joshi.
which you
I,
cannot.
I am a little less optimistic than you are. I'm a little less optimistic than you are about how soon we can restart our economy. I understand what you're saying about the situation can be disastrous as the impact of a recession or the recession begins to show. Basic numbers reveal the extent of job loss and business loss. 5 million people losing job in just 1 month. The salaried class, the class that's actually would have taken the home loan, the car loan, the personal loan, out of job. And this is post the unlocking. Not even the time when there was a lockdown, and so several businesses had to shut. These jobs are not going to come back quickly. My simple question here is, are the banks, is the Reserve Bank of India and the government together sitting and discussing this as their top priority? What happens when September comes, the loan repayment scheme kicks in, banks start asking their borrowers to repay, and they can't because they haven't worked for 6 months or they haven't worked for 3 months. They have a family to feed. What happens then? That's the question I'm asking here. Let me see if Mr. Raj Kishore is on the phone line, a viewer who called us from Visakhapatnam and was patiently waiting by, so I just need to bring him in as well. Yes, good evening, Mr. Raj Kishore. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, Tanvi, and good evening, all the panelists. I've been patiently listening from last, the debate started. So what, in the last 2 minutes, what Tanvi said is exactly what I wanted to say. I'm a software engineer. I'm having some personal loans and also a car loan. I've taken this moratorium for last month, which is of course not helping my cause by any means. And again, I got this SMS saying that next month you need to have that maintain some minimum 30,000 balance in your account so that we can debit it from your account. So, which is again, since last 6 months I'm not working, and again I need to pay that amount. So it's struggle will again start. So I'm not sure what is the next step I can do, and I'm not sure what is the government helping me in this cause, because I've seen BJP and central government is saying that they are helping people who lost the job and all by saying that they're providing moratorium and all. I don't know which ways it's going to help us. So as Tanvi rightly said, not sure what is the way ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely understand, Raj Kishore, where you stand today, and you won't be the only one. There are lakhs of people in the country having the same kind of thoughts in their head of what do we do next, how do we go about it. We start off with a conversation with your bank to see what they can do, but at the end of it, we will have to turn towards the central bank and towards the government to say what can be done. And let me just quickly go across to Mr. Sanjay Shah, and then Gopal Agarwal can respond to both. Yes, Mr. Shah.
Tanvi, I wanted to draw attention to a fact why our policymakers wait till the last minute. The moratorium should have been announced long time ago because we are on 26 and the moratorium will start on 1st. So by the time the government announces, the banks come out with the policy, they communicate to customers, millions would have paid their dues or become defaulter as per the norms. So I wonder why the policy decisions which are crucial are taken at the last minutes, because after they declare, the banks will sit down, make a policy, they will communicate to customers, ask them to sign certain documents. Some banks will ask them to confirm in advance whether they would opt for moratorium, will do by default. So all have different practices, and by the time they come to a solution, it will be another 15 days of September. So many would have become defaulter, or they would have paid the EMI by that time. So why the such decision not taken in advance, keeping in the timeline in mind?
Absolutely. Gopal Agarwal, would you want to respond to what he's saying about why are the policy decisions or any steps left till the last minute?
So, Tanvi, it had been a good education for me for sitting and listening to everybody's comment. Only I want to say here one point is that the economic considerations have several options, and the regulator and the government have to weigh those options and takes them. The best option is chosen, and there is not only one path through which the benefit to the people can go. Here, there was a query from one of the viewers. Then there are options like Manrega. There are options by EPFO has given relaxations on ESI also. There are issues. So the government is looking into the most weaker section of the base of the pyramid, where the money is more required, which is require more support from the government. There, the way the government is working, even agriculture sector has been given a lot of benefits. So
Mr. Gopal Agarwal, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, I hope you're not suggesting our software engineer to throw everything that he's worked for and studied for and spent on to become a software engineer, to just now leave that and go and register for a job for Manrega.
Tanvi, you cannot spin things like that.
Your response your response to my viewer was Manrega, which is why I'm clarifying with you.
I heard you for more than almost 40 minutes. The thing is, you are trying to spin the issue. The thing is that the government has to balance the problems. Government has to look into resources. The government has to look into the way which is the best option for the regulator or the banks to support the particular segment. If there are certain segment MSME, the government is looking into those issues. And the Mr. Joshi has very well said that the RBI has to look into the credit behavior also. So there are long-term implications. Those are in particular stress. For them, the stress, resolving of the stress and the IBC and those NPA restructuring, etc. are there. So they have to be specific cases, specific segments, specific industries. You cannot just take everything into consideration. All loans, all interest on loans are waived. And one thing I want to clarify, then Mr. Shah was saying that interest on interest, it is based on compounding period. If you have not paid interest for 1 month, that doesn't mean that interest will attract interest. It is after an year, once you have a cycle of calculation of interest, once that cycle of interest calculation happens, then only that becomes interest on interest. It is not that daily basis you will charge interest on interest. So these are the concept, economic concept, these are financial structure. They have to be understood in that light only. Government is, I'm not saying that the problem of particular segment is not there, it is there. But the government and the RBI and the
Want to
bank together are working to a solution which is will in the long term best support the thing. It is not, there is a issue of depositors interest. There are issues with regard
Okay,
to
okay.
credit
Two people
behavior.
want to respond to you, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. Two people want to respond to you. I will not be spinning any angles now, but let Sunil Allah come in. He wanted to make a point, and then I will go across to Dr. Kalra as well. Yes, Sunil.
Like all I'm saying is what Mr. Agarwal is saying is what the BJP government has done for everyone. Look, you had to take care of the poor first. So you got the supply side organized. You've done the Manrega. Now we are talking about 300 million people who are forming the middle class. They are the ones that are going to generate demand. Very little has been done for them, sir. And it's about time, after you've taken care of the poor, after you've done X, where have you done anything for the middle class, sir? That's the question that I'm asking, and they have to start generating demand. Nobody is going to borrow the money. Nobody is going to take and produce goods unless there is a demand. And therefore, the full cycle has to be done. That's the only point I'm making. Secondly, when you say that why is 18% charged by credit card system? Sir, they charge you interest on interest every month. Please understand. So if RBI is doing its best, RBI is telling the
Mr.
bank,
Alak,
one
this is
second, sir,
not
let me
related to
finish.
COVID
Agarwal,
particularly.
Mr. Agarwal, I didn't disturb you. Can you just
No,
hear
but
me out,
you
sir?
don't mix things, sir. It is not related to COVID only that credit card is charging this.
No, you are mixing things by bringing in Manrega. The 300 million people don't get Manrega, sir. Please
That I'm
understand what
answering
I'm
to
trying
that person. I'm
to
saying that
debate.
every segment has a responsibility. As government has
Sir,
to take care of every segment.
Okay,
You
okay,
cannot
Mr.
put
Gopal
all your
Agarwal, let him
resources
finish.
to one
Mr. Gopal
segment.
Agarwal, let him finish. I'll come back to you.
So you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah.
give
Let
me
Sunil
time
Allah
then.
finish, please. Yes.
Then you have to
listen,
give.
Yeah, I will.
I am saying that you have taken care of everybody in the poor. What about the 300 million now? I want them to be taken care of now. I didn't say from the beginning. Now you please take care of the 300 million people who are there to generate demand. Without demand, nobody is going to borrow the money, sir. And that is the question that I am raising. RBI cannot force banks. And I fully agree with that. RBI has reduced its interest. RBI can only request banks, are you passing it on or not? The role comes to the government when they have to instruct banks. RBI cannot instruct the bank. RBI is playing its role. RBI is even saying, please go and restructure well before the Kamath report comes. One second, sir, let me finish. So RBI has played its role. Now it's for the banks to come into play. Why are banks charging different fixed deposit interest? Why are credit cards charging 18% interest? I am saying, sir, they've reduced in all over the world. It's been brought down to 1% by the government. I am not saying bring it down to 1%. At least bring it down to 4 to 5%. The government has to step in now. Now is the time, sir. You're not listening to what I'm saying. Of course, BJP has done a lot for the poor. I'm not denying it. And therefore, don't mix it up. Today, we are not debating whether the poor have been looked after. What about the middle class? That's what we are debating today. And that's the point that we want to make. So don't say, of course, BJP has done a lot. Nobody is saying BJP hasn't. Don't confuse us. We are only discussing today is the
Okay, yes,
300
Mr.
million
Gopal Agarwal.
after.
Tanvi,
That's
there
all.
are 2-3 things that we have to be very clear. If you are asking me now what we are doing for middle class, I will tell for the middle class. That gentleman was asking for the poor class. So we are telling that how resources are allocated by the government to different segments. I am telling you that MSME and the NBFC and the daily rediwala, patriwala, small businesses, etc. Government has come out lot of schemes under the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So they, for that segment we have done that. They are not middle class. I can't understand what segment you are talking about. MSME is not middle class. NBFC is being financed by the middle class. Is it not NBFC financing the middle class? Is it not middle class? So the thing is that Mr. Alak wants the government to regulate interest rate, everything from the banks. Then at the same time, next day in the debate, he will tell that there has to be a autonomy. Why government is regulating everything? Now he's saying that regulate the credit card interest. The credit card charges interest when you overshoot your limit. So these things issues are commercial decisions. These are not related to COVID alone. So you are mixing everything.
When you have to promise us justice, when you have to when it comes to you, suits your narrative, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, then you take claim for whatever you want and take credit for what you want. Where you don't have a will to make changes, now you're saying, oh, we can't do it because it's up to the Reserve Bank of India and banks.
No,
let's be very honest. If the government has the will to bring in relief for the borrowers,
Reserve Bank is a part of our government.
yeah, so figure out more capital infusion if you need to help the banks. And put in the condition.
So what do you consider
put in
government?
the condition that when the banks get the support from the government, this is what they do. Now, let me bring in...
No, the Reserve Bank is part of government. Why you are saying government is not doing anything?
No.
Reserve Bank is
part of... I am not asking you to tell me what Reserve Bank of India will do. I will ask the RBI governor about that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the government needs to come up with its own policies.
What is government?
And its own ways to support the system
Prime Minister
to ensure that there is relief to the borrowers.
Borrowers
so Reserve Bank of India taking some steps is not the government doing it. I'm sorry, you are highly mistaken. Don't mislead my viewers. The steps that are taken by the Reserve Bank of India, the government cannot take credit for it. So are you telling me when the Reserve Bank of India in its annual report, now let me answer your question. Let me answer your question. Are you telling me when the Reserve Bank of India in its annual report says that the government needs to lead and boost consumption and the government needs to bring in structural reforms now, and the government needs to take steps to boost consumption in this country? Are you saying the government is saying that? Because I don't see the government doing that.
No, but I'm telling
you... Should I take the RBI annual report and what it says as what the government is saying?
So there are different parts of the government. If your finance minister is saying something, if the commerce
then
minister
is
saying something, MSME,
then don't take credit.
What doesn't it? Everything is part of the government.
Okay.
Everything, regulator, everything
is part of the government, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. When you want to take credit, it is not government's responsibility when you don't have the will to do anything. That's the only point I was making.
The responsibility
Dr. Kalra
of the decisions.
waiting to say something. Let me bring him in. Yes, Dr. Kalra.
See, with the onset of COVID, we had financial problems, and government and the RBI had given moratorium to us twice, 3 months plus 3 months, 6 months. I have 3 requests to them for the home buyers and other loan takers. First is this interest on interest must stop immediately. Second is that the rate of interest on the loan for this period can be reduced to the same level as the savings bank account level. Third, this moratorium should be extended by another 3 months. And hopefully by then we will have vaccine and we will start earning more. We will start getting our jobs back and the economic condition will be on the right path. So these 3 requests, interest on interest must stop, and the interest rate should be brought down to same as the savings bank level for this period, and this moratorium should be extended for 3 more months. Thank you.
Well, let me just say that the Supreme Court has said that you can't only be interested in profit, you have to consider the suffering of people. Centre's role is apparent behind RBI's decision. So why hide behind the RBI? Clarify your position under the Disaster Management Act. And so on 1st of September now, the centre will have to take a clear stand on interest in the Supreme Court, and then we'll see what the Supreme Court has to decide. Very quickly, completely out of time, but last word to Joel. Joel, if it comes down to individual borrowers having to figure their way out, is there a plan in place come September 1st, those who are unable to pay their loans or EMIs and interest, how do they go about getting any kind of relief or restructuring?
I think the RBI has already allowed banks to restructure these loans. So I think the banks will individually contact their own customers. I think if you're a customer or if you're a borrower who needs a restructuring or you cannot pay, I think you should approach your bank, ask them what they can do to help you, and probably ask for longer tenure or probably lower rates. I think rates at the lowest in many years right now. So I think the borrowers should approach their banks. I think banks are already being directed by the RBI. I hope they are just telling their customers that it is open, and they're giving them enough of publicity that this can be done. Basically, I think that's what customers, if I was a borrower, I would have done that. Approach your bank and ask for restructuring of your loan.
Okay, thank you so much. In fact, I think that is what a lot of people should start doing right now. Figure out if there is some more relief that your bank can offer you, restructure your loan, reduce the burden on you for at least a few more months. See if they're actually giving you the lower interest. Have they passed on the benefit of the steps taken by the RBI and reduce your interest rate as well on your loan? That's what you have to figure out. Joel Rebello, thank you so much for joining us and breaking it down for our viewers to understand. Thank you, Sunil Alak and Dipali Panjoshi also for joining us. I hope our borrowers got some kind of answers to the questions they were looking in. Mr. Gopal Agarwal, for all of the arguing that I do with you, I do appreciate you joining me on the debates and taking our questions from our viewers and from me as well. Thank you to all of our panelists. Viewers, one thing is very clear. The tough times haven't gone away. Just yesterday, the Reserve Bank of India projected a minus 4.5% growth for our country. Think about it. People borrowed money when we were growing at 8%, when they were getting great jobs, when they were getting great salaries, then they were banking on great appraisals and buying homes and cars and taking personal loans for other needs. Now we are looking at the economy growing at minus 4.5%. People have lost jobs. Industries have shut down on a larger extent, from aviation to hospitality. We don't know when those businesses will restart. There are layoffs, salary cuts in every other sector that you can think of, and you all know it because you are going through it, you are part of it, you see what's going on around you. And so there is no denying the fact that basic loan repayments will not be easy for a large percentage of our borrowers. And the sooner our banks, Reserve Bank of India and government come out with a solution, the better it is going to be for you, the borrower. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.